There is a lot of science behind all of this, and that is something that, I try to emphasize, whether you're canning, freezing, or drying, that the steps that we recommend are there because it really is researched, and it's the best way to get the best quality and safest food in the end.
A variety of fresh fruits and vegetables are available at local farmers markets and grocery stores. While most are picked at their peak freshness, how they're stored at home will determine how long they last and retain their best flavor. A K-State Research and Extension food safety specialist explains the types of produce that should be stored in the refrigerator, which can ripen on the counter, then be refrigerated, and which should be stored only at room temperature. On today's Sound Living, properly storing fresh fruits and vegetables. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. Karen Blakeslee, who is also coordinator of the university's Rapid Response Center, says that the storage method you choose depends on which type of fruit or vegetable is being stored. Karen, it's that time of year when we're buying a lot of fresh fruits, a lot of fresh vegetables. The key now is making sure that that lasts as long as we want it to and that it maintains its flavor. And there's a number of ways we can do that. Basically, we're looking at refrigeration or room temperature or maybe a combination.
Exactly. And which one of those storage methods to use depends on what the produce is. For the types of fruit and vegetables to put in the refrigerator, things like fresh berries and cherries, your stone fruit like apricots, those are very perishable and those need to be refrigerated. Berries especially, they can go moldy within a day or two. Apples, if you're using them within 7 days, you can keep those at room temperature, but if you're going to store them longer, I'd put them in the refrigerator. It just helps preserve their quality a little longer. Grapes are another one that really do need to be refrigerated. Again, those can get a little moldy if you leave them at room temperature for an extended period of time. And then there's a lot of vegetables that do need to be refrigerated, especially your leafy greens, celery, carrots, broccoli, green beans, asparagus. And on asparagus, sometimes it's a good idea to put the bottom ends of those in a cup of water, and it helps keep that produce hydrated so they don't wrinkle up and dry out. Same thing with some herbs, particularly basil. And basil is one that really is better, actually, to store at room temperature, but put it in a cup of water, and that'll help keep that fresh. So there's several items that really do need the refrigerator so that they last a little longer. Now, there are some that need a little more ripening first, and then you should refrigerate them, like nectarines, peaches, pears, plums, those kinds of things. So let those ripen on the counter first. If peaches are a little hard, sometimes it works to put those in a paper bag and fold it together and let the natural ethylene gas that the peaches have help ripen themselves. Another little trick is to stick an apple in with that, too. An apple will help speed up the ripening on those. So just pay attention to them because they can ripen fairly quickly. And then things that could be stored only at room temperature, bananas, unless they're starting to get a little brown, you see your brown spots showing up, then you could put them in the refrigerator or even freeze them and then use them in a smoothie or something like that. Melons, any citrus fruits, pineapple. As far as vegetables, onions, garlic, potatoes, things like that, those can be stored at room temperature. I would keep the onions and garlic away from your potatoes because they don't get along too well, and the onions and garlics can actually make your potatoes sprout faster. So try to keep them separated in some way. Tomatoes are another one that really are better to let them sit at room temperature. And on all of these, especially any of these that are at room temperature, once you cut them open, and if you've got leftovers, you have to refrigerate them. So just depends on which it is, but there are ways to help extend the storage life of those while they're still fresh.
If you're at a farmer's market or at the local grocery store, is there a way to tell when something is either too ripe to buy or maybe just right to buy?
Well, a lot of times color is probably the first thing to look at. Bananas, for example. How do you like your bananas? I personally like mine a little green, but sometimes you'll see them at the grocery store that are starting to turn a little brown. Those are good for making banana bread. But look at the color. You can pick them up and feel them. A lot of your firmer fruits, like your peaches and nectarines, should have a little give to them. If they're hard as a rock, they're still kind of green. So first take a look at them and then pick things up and feel them. Look over leafy greens and broccoli and things like that. Turn them around and look at them. If you see any damage or any brown spots or anything like that, they're starting to get a little past their prime. Just pay attention to those visual clues, and that'll help you pick the better produce.
I've heard about thumping on watermelons and cantaloupes, things like that, looking at kind of the underside to see what color that might be. Any truth to that?
Yeah, from what I understand from our horticulture experts, it's better to look at the color of melons, the bottom, the yellow part of it, and look for that buttery yellow color. The thumping, yeah, some people swear by it, but you really got to know what you're listening for. So really, it's better to look at that color. The stem area of cantaloupes, it shouldn't be green anymore. You probably smell the cantaloupe fragrance from that. So that should give you a clue that those are ready to be used.
You mentioned berries and mold, and that's one of the things that I've really taken notice of is sometimes even in the store you will see it in the container that there's a berry or two that are moldy.
Yeah, that's why it's a good idea to pick up those packages and look them over really well and try to inspect them as best you can. If you see something that doesn't look right, tell somebody. Usually there's somebody around. So track somebody down and say, hey, these are moldy, so that they're aware of it and they can take those out.
When we get home and we start storing things in the refrigerator that can go into the fridge, are there some things we should think about in terms of using the crisper drawer, not using the crisper drawer? Do we put them in the coldest spot? Does it make a difference?
Well, I think the drawers are handy because, that helps keep those things separated from other foods you have in the refrigerator. The refrigerators have some amazing technology these days, and so even some temperature controls on them. So I would recommend that you read the manual for your refrigerator to see what foods are best stored in whatever drawers you have. And the other thing about, once you bring those things home, should you wash everything first? Not necessarily. A lot of times, especially like on leafy greens, sometimes that can shorten the shelf life. Same thing on berries. That can shorten them too. So in most cases, it's usually better to wait to wash things until you're ready to use them.
I think I saw something that said humidity is good, wet is bad.
Yeah, if it's going to sit in a puddle of water, that's not good. That just invites spoilage a lot faster. A little humidity can rehydrate the whole fruit or vegetable itself, whereas if part of it's just sitting in a puddle of water, then that's usually not so good. And one little trick that I like to do, and it seems to work pretty well, is on leafy greens. When I put those in a container, I also put a paper towel over them, and it just helps absorb any residual moisture. And I feel like it actually helps them last a little longer.
If someone is lucky enough to have their own garden and they have a lot of berries or a lot of produce, I guess their best option might be at certain times of the season to do their own canning or freezing or drying.
Absolutely. If you've run out of options to give your produce away and you enjoy doing food preservation, these are great options. It does take some extra equipment to do all of these things. Obviously, with canning, you've got to have a water bath canner and or a pressure canner because certain vegetables, for example, like green beans, they must be pressure canned. Any kind of what we call low-acid vegetables, that's green beans, potatoes, corn, carrots, things like that. Plain vegetables, they must be pressure canned. Any fruits like peaches, apples, cherries, those can be processed in a water bath canner. And we have a lot of publications on all of this to help guide you on what steps to take so that you are doing this safely. That's the bottom line. It needs to be done the right way and using the right method, and that way you end up with the safest product in the end. Freezing is really easy. Obviously, you need some kind of freezer-safe packaging to wrap the produce in. There's a lot of options out there these days, whether it's the plastic containers or the reclosable plastic bags. Be sure to get the freezer type. There's freezer and then there's storage type bags or even containers. The freezer ones are a little heavier, and so that helps protect the food from getting freezer burn, from drying out. They don't tear as easily. So be sure to buy the proper type of packaging for whatever you're wanting to freeze. And then dehydrating is another one that, again, a dehydrator really helps that whole process. You could do it in your oven. It's not very energy efficient. Usually takes a little longer. So that's why a dehydrator is really the best way to go. Sun drying here in Kansas really doesn't work very well because it's too humid, and it would take a lot longer. So a little investment in a dehydrator. There's a lot of options out there, a lot of different sizes, lots of bells and whistles. So it's kind of whatever's going to work for your situation.
A lot of companies stopped production during the pandemic. They're gearing up again, but supplies could be limited or maybe not even available.
Yeah, it's been a real challenge on a lot of things. And one in particular related to this is the canning lids. This has been a real problem in the supply because obviously none of us were ready for a pandemic, and neither were they. So they got caught, and everybody decided last year that they were going to can their food. So the lids have been in high demand, but they are coming back. Here in Manhattan, I just noticed here in the local grocery store that they are back since last weekend. So that's a good thing. So be patient. They're coming. If you are ordering online, be very careful. Do your homework. Read the fine print. Some of these off brands are not the best. They're not made as well as the traditional trusted brands that we commonly use. And so those off brands could lead to seal failures. They may buckle, they may wrinkle. So be very careful about that. People are a little desperate. I know that gardens are going to be producing, but they're coming. So I figure if it's getting to Manhattan, it's got to be coming to your local grocery store or box store, hopefully very soon.
Can you freeze first and then can later?
In some cases that works, but the quality of things will be much lower. It's not the best idea. And the food itself will compact more, so the heat won't go through the jar like it should. Now, if you're going to, say, tomatoes, for example, you could freeze the tomatoes and then you could make that into like a tomato juice. That's not going to make any difference. But if you're going to leave it, the pieces intact, they will compact, they will get mushier, and they will shrink more. And so the canning process may not be adequate enough.
It is a science, and all of the recipes are based on fresh fruit.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is a lot of science behind all of this, and that is something that I try to emphasize, whether you're canning, freezing, or drying, that the steps that we recommend are there because it really is researched and it's the best way to get the best quality and safest food in the end.
And Extension has a couple of different sites that people can go to.
Yeah, for any kind of food preservation information, my website, which is the Rapid Response Center, it's www.rrc.ksu.edu, and you'll see a section right there on the homepage for food preservation. Lots and lots of information there. So do your homework before you get started. Our food safety website, which is ksre.ksu.edu/food safety. We've got information about food storage, food waste, lots of food safety information on there. And then our nutrition friends, they also have information on produce safety and the nutrients and storage also.
That's K-State Research and Extension Food Safety Specialist Karen Blakeslee. She's also the coordinator of the university's Rapid Response Center. Again, more information on storing fresh fruits and vegetables, along with preservation techniques, is available online at rrc.ksu.edu and at ksre.ksu.edu/food safety. You can also contact your local county or district extension office for more information. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.